Yeah, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our 8th Young Professionals webinar. My name is Kulufelo, and I am a member of the Young Professionals community here at SUPEX, which is aimed at addressing the needs of students and graduates so that they can better navigate the challenging world of work. Now, before I introduce our guest for today, I'd like to go through a few house rules. Firstly, please make sure that your microphone is muted so that we can avoid any interruptions during the presentation. And secondly, please feel free to type any questions that you have in the group chat. Now, there's a quote by Harriet B. Baker, which states that conflict avoidance is not the hallmark of a good relationship. On the contrary, it is a symptom of serious problems and poor communication. I find this quote to be very fitting for today's webinar, since that the topic for today is making difficult conversations easy, three keys to mastery. Now, as students, sometimes we are required to work in groups, and as supply chain professionals, we are often required to work in teams, and this can sometimes produce conflict. Now, effective communication, which is the process of transmitting, receiving, and decoding ideas, is often viewed as a vital enabler of productive teamwork and conflict resolution. And this is where our speaker for today comes in. Leslie Fiorenzo is the founder of Coach with Leslie LLC and a former HR and EAP professional turned communication strategist. Leslie has over 30 years of experience helping employers solve their trickiest people problems. She founded her own practice after hearing the frustrations around poor communication and ineffective conflict management in many organizations. Working with individuals and teams alike, she helps her clients strengthen engagement, boost morale, and maximize productivity. By working with Leslie, teams improve communication skills, resolve long-standing conflicts, maximize productivity, and focus on what really matters, the people. Over her career, she has taught thousands of professionals conflict resolution techniques, and she knows what works and what doesn't. That's why she wrote the 21 lessons for mastering the difficult conversations. Along with her professional certifications, she holds a master's in human resource development from Western Michigan University. Without any further delays, Leslie, over to you, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for that introduction, Kadolfo. It's wonderful to be with everyone today and just share some ideas. And so the challenge with any virtual event to me is making this as interactive as possible. So I would welcome you to type in the chat. I know this is being recorded, so we'd like a clean recording, but if you would prefer to unmute yourself and ask a question, that's okay too. And I know we'll have time at the end for that. So let me share my screen and we'll get started. So one other detail I need to attend to here, there we go. So one of the things I have noticed as I've worked with people, and it really is along the quote that Kadolfo started with, I'm not saying that correctly, Kadolfo started with, is about the idea that we think when we avoid things, they'll somehow miraculously get better. And so if there's one thing you leave with today, it would be not to be conflict avoidant, right? To find a process, and I want to share with you a process today. Let me just share with you where we're going. I want to share with you a process to prepare the conversation. I want to give you a method to help you remain calm, because I think when we enter things in a calm manner, we're far better served. And I believe a lot of this has to do with mindset. So I'll spend some time towards the end of our time together on some mindset ideas. So here's what I'd like from you at this point, is if you would type in the chat, what word or phrase comes to mind when you hear the word difficult conversation? If we were to play a word association game, if you will, and I said difficult conversations, what would you say back to me? And we've got some people that are fast. Emotions, offended. Okay, awesome. Age gap. Oh, that's interesting. Conflict. Yes, for sure. So I have to go back and ask, tell me when you say age gap, tell me a little bit more about that, May, because that's interesting to me. I'm not really sure. Argument, yes, a lot of people think of it as argument. Hard truth, misunderstood, perception. Absolutely, I'm going to talk about perceptions. And sometimes it's a hard truth. Thank you. Opinion, yeah, we're going to talk about opinions because everybody has opinions, right? Good. So I appreciate you chiming in this manner and sharing some ideas with me through chat. So feel free to keep it up if you have a comment, you know, and I think you probably can privately chat if you would prefer to have a conversation. I know it's a sidebar, but oh well. So generational differences. Oh yes. So yeah, because a lot of people in, we'll say certain generations, maybe boomers, but maybe traditional, were taught there's some things we don't talk about. And it does seem to be true with younger generations, millennials, and younger people. I can't remember the proper terms right off the top of my head, that they have a difference of opinion and are much freer in conversation. So yeah, my reality versus others' reality. So thanks, everyone. I appreciate that. So let's talk about a preparation tool. Several years ago, I worked with a woman, and one of her favorite phrases was, "Well begun is half done." And I think when we think about conversations with people, especially having a plan, I believe is important. And when we think about having conversations that are important, that are impactful, that maybe we perceive as difficult or hard, or the hard truth, it can really increase trust. Nothing decreases trust quicker in an organization than when people talk to each other, about each other, when we're not able to talk face to face, but I'll use the word gossip because sometimes that's what it is. And we want to be able to have strong working relationships, and that can help us build an effective organization. So before I talk about the tool, let me just make up a story. Whoops, I clicked too many times. My mouse was slow to respond. So here's what I want to tell you. And this story is truly a made-up story, but it's made up based on some things that I am familiar with in all my years at work. And we're going to make up a story about Jack, who's the vice president of sales, and Jill is who is the chief financial officer. Now, it really doesn't matter what the company's selling. I'm going to put it in a manufacturing location because that's my background, but you might be in healthcare, you might be in financial services, you might be in some other industry, but every industry has some kind of sales function, and everybody has some person who's responsible for keeping track of the dollars, right? The chief financial officer. So here's the deal in this case. Jack historically fails him to turn in his sales projections so that Jill can complete a report. And Jill's talked to Jack, and Jack promises he'll do better, but he fails at that. So it's a little bit frustrating on her part because he said he would, and he doesn't. And the other thing that Jill mistakenly does is she goes to Harry. So, you know, Jack's, oh yeah, I will, and doesn't. So she's tired of going back to Jack because he's not fulfilling his promise. So she turns to Harry, who's the boss and the owner. And Harry often defends Jack. Jack's what we call a rainmaker. Jack's somebody in sales who brings in the business. And Harry doesn't want to rock the boat too much because, you know, Jack's doing what he needs to do and bringing in business. So what I want you to think about is Jill comes to you as a professional colleague. What advice would you give her? And just keep that in the back of your mind. There's no need to put it in chat or share it with anybody, but I just want you to think about that. And I want you to think about the fact that it's often the little things that get in our way. And you might be familiar with this story. Long ago, on the slope of Long's Peak in Colorado in the United States, there lies a ruin of a gigantic tree. Now, naturalists tell us this tree stood for some 400 years. It was a seedling. when Columbus landed in San Salvador, and half grown by the time the Pilgrims arrived at Plymouth Rock. During the course of its long life, it was struck by lightning 14 times, and innumerable avalanches and storms of 4 centuries thundered past it. It survived them all. In the end, it was an army of beetles that attacked the tree and leveled it to the ground. The insects ate their way through the bark and gradually destroyed the inner strength of the tree by their tiny but incessant attacks. A forest giant, which age had not withered, nor lightning blasted, nor storm subdued, fell at last by beetles so small you could crush them between your thumb and your forefinger. And this story, to me, ladies and gentlemen, really demonstrates what happens to us oftentimes in our workplace with difficult conversations and in our relationships with people. It's not the big things, it's the little things, as the case with Jill and Jack. Now, some of you in your chat, when I said, let's play this game, you said it's about perspective. I think we had a couple people remark about that. And what I want you to think about is the fact that if I can shift from you're wrong to we're in this together, it helps me shift my perspective. As you can see, I hope you can see on the slide, when I'm looking at a 6 or when I'm looking at the number 9, just because you're right doesn't mean I'm wrong, it says. You've just not seen my side. So keep in mind what I call the magical ground rule. When someone and I are in a discussion and maybe we're having a disagreement, if I can state their side of the case as clearly as they can state it, does not mean I need to agree. Perspective is not about agreement, but it's about stepping in to the other person's space, seeing things from their perspective. So if I can state their case just as clearly as they can, then maybe I can begin to understand. And we'll talk a little bit more about understanding in just a few minutes. But think about the fact that oftentimes I get really married, I'll say, to my viewpoint, my perspective, and it could be hard for me to come around and see the other side. And I saw this idea demonstrated not too long ago. We went to a friend's little girl's birthday party, and we were out at the beach, and it was a really windy day. And her mom had bought, she turned 6, so her mom had bought a display with some balloons and the number 6. And the number 6 was attached to a pole that she put in the ground. But when the wind blew, it spin it to a 9. And she became really upset. She kept turning that around. And I thought, oh, this is such a great example of this exact point. So when I think about preparation, keep in mind this acronym or mnemonic. I call it a mnemonic. I want to talk to you because the way we start the conversation is extremely important. And I do have a couple of documents that I would be happy to send you. One is the because, and I've got a couple other things. If you want them, you just need to email me. I'll put my email address up at the end. You maybe already have it. But why is this person important to you? I want to talk to you because, and maybe it's simply this. You and I are colleagues, and I want our time together at work to be the best possible time it can be. So really think hard about why you want to have this conversation and why this person is important to you. And so I want to talk to you because. And then the B stands for behavior. Behavior is about what you can see and what you can hear. Behavior is about describing someone's actions without judgment and without assuming we know why someone is doing something. So for example, imagine you're in traffic behind a vehicle, you're driving, you're behind a vehicle, and you're stopped at a traffic light, and the road is 2 lanes, and as far as you can see, there's oncoming traffic, and the person ahead of you, when the light turns green, they don't move forward. As a matter of fact, they put their car in park and monkey around with something you can't see what. What are you doing? Probably if you're like me, well, we're like me maybe, I'd honk my horn, right? I'd get a little impatient, a little frustrated, and they don't move forward. What story am I telling myself about that driver? Maybe it's they're inconsiderate. Maybe they just are, who gave them their license, all kinds of things. I'm angry at that other driver. And then later on, I might become angry with myself because I chose that route. There was another route open to me, and I failed somehow. But maybe if I tell myself a different story, it can allow me to become curious. Maybe I can say, you know what, there was something happening in the backseat of that car. I don't know what it was, but something that person had to attend to. Maybe, just maybe, it was an infant in the back seat who was having trouble breathing or maybe choking, or there was something catastrophic going on. So the stories I tell myself are really important, because when we look at somebody's behavior, we're always making up a story about why they might be doing what they're doing. And the fact of the matter is, we often don't know. So when I talk to somebody about their behavior, and I'm going to use the analogy of tardiness, because that's an easy behavior to see, right? If you're supposed to be there at 9 and you're arriving at 9:05, that's tardy. And you can't deny the clock. Now, maybe people are flexible and it doesn't matter if you're there punctually right at 9. Okay. But if it is important that we start right on time, then being late, you're either, no such thing, right, as not late. You're late or you're not. So then what effect does that have, maybe on the team, maybe on the project, maybe on the entire organization? But talk about the effect. So when you're late, what does that do? Well, maybe I've got to put somebody on their place, or maybe the project is at risk. If you fail to turn in your work on time, maybe it's not showing up for a meeting, but I haven't completed my end of the project, then that can be a problem. So what's the effect of that person's behavior? And then what do you want to happen? What needs to be different? What does a new future look like? And I want you to think about the fact that we will not do ourselves any favors by trying to come to agreement on the details of the past. What we need to do is be thinking about being future focused. So I'll go back to the story I made up about Jack and Jill, right? And Jill had gone to Jack several times. Jack has promised but failed to deliver. It won't benefit Jill to say, Jack, 6 times you told me you would. No, Jack, I need you to get me your sales projections, because when you don't, this is what it causes me, right? And I can't get the numbers to Harry, and we've got other things going on. She can have a whole list of why this is important. But the question then she needs to ask Jack is, help me understand, or what might be preventing you from making this happen? What's getting in your way? Not why aren't you following through on your promise? Why is a little threatening? Why brings up a little defensiveness? But what's the cause? What could be going on? I need to understand. Help me understand what might be happening. And then when you ask a question like that, you be quiet and wait for their response. Silence can be an extremely effective communication tool when we learn to use it correctly. When we ask a question and then we're just quiet and wait for a response. Most people are a little uncomfortable with silence, and they will fill it. We can be patient long enough. So tricks like counting to 10, maybe even need to count to 20 or 30, listening for their response. So this is a time when you allow them to respond. And then step in with understanding. Douglas Stone and his colleagues wrote a book on crucial conversations. And one of the quotes that I love from that work is, people almost never change without first feeling understood. So, I know that everyone's job has a lot of deadlines and a lot of pressures. Jill's job does, Jack's job does. So maybe he's feeling like Jill's not understanding what's happening, or she might be feeling that same way. But unless we're really willing to step in, as Covey told us in his 7 habits, first seek to understand and then be understood. Now, this book is about 30 years old. And I'm going to guess that this book might have been written before some of you were even alive on this planet. That's okay. It's a great classic. And I would encourage you, I'm pretty sure it's available on Audible if you prefer to listen as opposed to read. But in Habit 5, Covey talks about the fact that we need to seek to understand the other person first before we can expect to be understood. And he outlines a dialogue between a father and son. And he outlines it in 2 different ways. In the first way, he writes about 4 autobiographical responses that he says most humans, I've got to agree, most humans respond this way. We evaluate what the person's saying. We're either agreeing or disagreeing. We probe. We ask questions from our frame of reference. We advise. We give counsel based on our experience. Or we interpret, we try to figure out and explain their motives and behaviors from our own perspective. And Covey says these behaviors are natural and they're deeply scripted. In other words, we've had them a long time. So when we have a script that's ingrained in us, it really is a challenge to change. That whole idea of perspective, when I see something my way, if I'm seeing that 6, it's hard to come around and see that 9. But it is possible. And he does a brilliant job. It's probably one of the best descriptions I've ever seen of how the father begins to change his approach to the conversation with the son and ask different questions and listen in a way that the son feels understood. So I would highly recommend it. Be solution-oriented and future-focused. Past is the past, have to leave it there. What's the new future going to look like, and how can we solve this? Right? I already said you won't resolve an issue trying to force agreement on what's happened in the past. What's going to be different next time? And then the other question is, what if we slip back into past patterns? How are we going to resolve that? What are some signals? What are some things we need to do to make sure we're not going down the same path over and over? We're not resolving this issue time and time again. How are we going to make sure we get to our solution and keep our solution? And it says express faith in them. Maybe it's expressing faith in both of you, in our ability to solve this. I mean, we're smart people, right? We know we want to do this job together. We want to get this project accomplished. We want to get this work done, this task done, whatever it is we're talking about. I know we can do it. We've got a plan. We've just come up with a solution that we can implement and move this forward. So now let's return to our story. It's 3:30 in the afternoon on the day of the month that the report is due. Now, Jill heard a rumor that Jack is on the golf course with their best customer. And Jack's administrative assistant said Jack failed to give her the information. Jill's tried to reach Jack on his mobile device. not answering, not picking up. Jill's son is in the championship ball game that evening, and she needs to leave the office on time so she can be at the game. Report is due tomorrow morning on the CEO's desk at 10. What would you tell Jill to do? What advice at this point in time, given our story we made up before, she came to you before for advice, now she's coming again. So just type in the chat, or if you prefer, you can unmute yourself. And I know it takes a moment or two to type, so I'm going to be patient and let you participate in that way. All right, I have one answer. Let me see what it says. Join the golf game. Hey, no one's ever said that before. Interesting. Yeah. If I know the course, maybe I can find them, right? Alert her line manager client immediately and manage expectations. Yes, manage expectations and be with her son. I think boundaries are really important. And, you know, we have many, many jobs probably over our career, many, many clients, but one child, or in this case, you know, the one son. So good. So again, what I would tell Jill is absolutely be with her son in the morning. Okay, submit a report. Oh, I missed it. Two came in at once. Submit report prematurely. Yeah, let her boss know she's waiting. I don't have the numbers from Jack, but here's what I've got so far. Given the circumstances, the partner was not aware and about the golf, so take work home, complete it after the game, come in early the next day. That's a possibility too. But if we don't have the data, it's hard to complete the report. So simply saying to someone, Jack, what I would say to Jill is she submit the report and let Jack know that I had to submit it up without your data. So I don't know what for sure Harry's going to think. Possibly, and again, asking Jack that what question, because you've promised me on several occasions this would happen. What is preventing you and what can we do different moving forward? And so it doesn't get to be that bone of contention. That's part of the challenge, I believe, with difficult conversations is they're somewhat repetitive because we haven't figured out a way to solve them. Sometimes they're just about situations we rather not address. I really don't want to talk to somebody about that. Maybe it's a little embarrassing or maybe it's a little frustrating. But in order for us to have a successful relationship, we need to get this out and open. We need to talk to each other about it and we need to resolve it. When we get frustrated, we are likely to lose our composure. Because when we're upset and our heart beats at over 100 beats per minute, we literally lose our ability to hear. Not only are we not listening anymore, we can't hear. And I know you've probably seen YouTube videos, for example, of really bad customer service interactions where the person I saw one not too long ago in a workshop a colleague of mine was doing, and the woman was really upset about her drive-in meal. She didn't get what she wanted, so she came into the restaurant, the fast food restaurant, and the person behind the counter was not helpful at all because they just attacked back, and so the thing escalated. No one was listening because both of them were really upset. So how do I calm down? How do I make sure that I stay calm in that moment? Because I call it amygdala hijack, and you probably know the amygdala is a small almond-shaped gland in your brain that controls what we often call the fight or flight response. And we can't necessarily stop it from happening, but we can train ourselves to take a step back when it does. Because the part of our brain that our employers hired us for is the prefrontal cortex, right? The thinking part of our brain. But if we let ourselves get upset, if we let our amygdala get triggered, and it will get triggered, we just can't let it lose control. We've got to take a step back. So breathing techniques can be an effective tool to do that. The challenge is we need them at the ready before we're in that moment. So I encourage people to, a few times a day, a few being 3 to 5, put a alarm on your phone, if that makes sense, or if you have some kind of wearable device, right? An Apple Watch, a Fitbit, a Garmin, whatever. There's lots of brands. It will signal you to breathe. And so breathing and counting can be a very helpful way to lower your heart rate. And I know this is true because I've experienced it myself. And one of the practices I've instituted since the pandemic, since I don't have a commute anymore at the end of the day, but I wanted to transition from my home office out the other side of the door. So I take a 2-minute space that, when I end my day, set my counter for 2 minutes and simply breathe into the count of 3, hold it for 3, exhale to the count of 3, and hold my exhale for 3. And so I do that until my timer goes off. And I know it's dropped my heart rate by at least, in some cases, a couple days, 10 beats a minute. So it can be a very effective tool. Now, some people prefer to breathe in one color and out another. So they inhale a calming color, for example, blue, and exhale red. It really doesn't matter. You may like a visualization. There's an app called Calm. There's a couple other ones that aren't going to come to me, but there's a lot of ways to do this. But breathing techniques, I believe, are essential tools to help us maintain calm and maintain our composure. But we need them before we're in that moment. We don't want to learn something when we're heated and when we're stressed out. We want to be able to practice and then, oh yeah, just got to breathe and focus on my breath. All too often, we see things going awry. We see them the worst case scenario. Visualize it going well. Visualize that colleague being really receptive to your ideas and to you and partnering and stepping in, or maybe it's not a colleague, maybe it's a parent, maybe it's a friend, but visualize success. Visualize an outcome where everybody wins. Oftentimes we think, well, we'll probably have to compromise. Maybe, but maybe we can both get what we want. Maybe Covey coined this phrase, win-win. At least I think he did. So how can we both get what we want? How can we both win? And then watch your language about how you talk about. Because if I go around stating something's going to be awful or terrible, guess what? It probably will be. So here's 3 words, or maybe 2 words and a phrase that I want to encourage you to think about eliminating. Have to, should, or must. When I have to do something, when I must do something, when I should do something, it gives it a connotation. I should go, or I should talk, I get to, I want to, I choose to. We say it in relationship to school, or I have to take this class, I have to take this course, or work, I have to go to work today, I have to do my shift today, I have to make my bed, I have to get up in the morning. Well, nothing's requiring that really, but I'm going to choose to. I'm going to choose to go to work. I'm going to choose to do that errand. I'm going to choose to study. I get to, right? If I get to go to work today, that's a whole different feeling than I have to. Or I get to go be with my friend, get to go hang out, whatever it is. So replace should, must, and have to with get to, want to, and choose to. I believe language is extremely important, and about how we talk about things is really important. And that leads me to our last idea. And that idea is about mindset. So in Stone's work, Difficult Conversations, How to Discuss What Matters Most. Great book, by the way. I know it's available on Audible. Difficult conversations are almost never about getting the facts right, but they're about conflicting perceptions, interpretations, and values. So think about that next time you've got to have one of these conversations you're perceiving as difficult, because it might be a perception, it might be an interpretation, or it might be a value. So let me share a few ideas about that. What if Jack believes the company should do all it can do to satisfy the customer, and Jill doesn't believe in breaking any rules or guidelines to keep a customer happy? So here we have a perception difficulty, right? A difference in perception. Imagine, if you will, a time before we drove in cars or even rode on bicycles or flew in airplanes or had any kind of motorized vehicle. Transportation was foot, horseback, or maybe a small boat or personal watercraft. So you're coming into there's a clearing in the forest next to a river. And the first person that comes into this clearing is on horseback. And they're looking around for a place to tether their horse. And they don't really see one, but they do see a fairly large stick laying across the ground and think, hey, if the ground's kind of soft because it's muddy by the riverbank, and if I pick that stick up and put it into the ground, it will allow me to tether my horse there, and then I can be on my way in a few minutes. And that's exactly what they did. Well, when they left the area, they left that stick up in the ground, perpendicular. So for the next person on horseback to tether their horse. But the next person to come in the clearing was not on horseback, they were on foot. And they saw that stick sticking up just before the river's edge and thought, if someone comes into this clearing in the dark, they won't see that stick. And as they walk to the water, they could run right into that and maybe hurt themselves. So they took the stick out in consideration for their fellow travelers. The next person to come in the clearing was neither on horseback or on foot. They were in a small boat, and they were looking around for a place to tie up their boat and saw that stick and again put it in the ground, left it there in consideration for the next person that came along the river in a boat. But the next person was a fisherman, and he was looking around for a place to sit down and cast his line in the water and catch his dinner. And so he saw that stick and saw a couple of logs and thought, hey, this would kind of make a good bench. So he created a bench and sat down and went fishing for a while and then left it there for the next fisher person who came along and wanted a place to sit. And the last person that came into the clearing was a woodsman. And he was looking for dry firewood. And he saw that stick and picked it up and carried it back to his home so he could have a nice warm fire for him and his family. So who's to say that any of those people were right or wrong by the way they perceived or used that stick? Now, sometimes it's a clash of values. Maybe Jack values speed and Jill values accuracy. But there's nothing wrong with either value. It's just sometimes there's a clash. Can we be speedy and accurate at the same time? Well, maybe. It seems like in our modern world, we are continually speeding up, sometimes at the sacrifice of accuracy, but there's more and more ways that computers are helping us resolve some of those issues. So it might be a clash of values, and speed and accuracy are not the only values, but just sometimes things aren't compatible with each other. So we have to ask ourselves, am I valuing something that you're not, or vice versa, or is it how we're prioritizing our values? And the last piece that Stone talked about was interpretations. Maybe Jill thinks the annual sales meeting is an inexpensive waste of time, but Jack sees it as an opportunity to recognize his top performers and reward his team. Now, in this kind of conversation, Jack and Jill could easily implement the magical ground rule, right? The idea that I've got to step into your frame of mind, your perspective, and see it from your way, and then vice versa, right? I've got to see this as a benefit, or I've got to see it as an expense that maybe doesn't need to happen. And we have those conversations. So the other thing about perspective is it's all in our choosing. Once upon a time, there was an old farmer who worked his land for many years. And this was at a time, again, before modern machinery, modern farming equipment. And he worked his field with a horse and plow. And one day his horse ran away. And upon hearing the news, his neighbors said, "Oh my gosh, what rotten luck, such bad luck." And the farmer simply shrugged his shoulders and said, "Perhaps." Because the next morning, the horse returned and brought with it a wild horse. And now the farmer had two horses. "What good luck," the neighbor said. And the farmer simply said, "You never know." The following day, his son tried to break the wild horse for farm work and was thrown off the horse and broke his leg. And again, the neighbor said, "Such bad luck." And the farmer said, "You never know." One day, shortly thereafter, as his son lay in bed recuperating, whoops, I advanced the slide too quickly. The military officials came to the village and drafted every young man into the army. But his son didn't have to go because he was in bed with a broken leg. And again, the villagers said, "What good luck," right? And the farmer simply said, "You never know." So we just want to be clear about our interpretations and understand there's a variety of interpretations and we can all have different viewpoints. So as we kind of wrap things up today, I do have a 12-point checklist that I would happily email to you. You just have to ask me for it. And it's kind of this is a recap of that checklist. But if after I have, this is post-conversation, right? After I have the conversation, did I start with why? I want to talk to you because why are you important? Why is resolving this issue important? And then I focused on behavior. I maintained my calm. I focused on the issue. I kept the topic future focused. We got a plan of action together. We talked about pitfalls and solutions. And then I ended by thanking the other person, right? Showing appreciation for the other person. Now, sometimes by this point, people usually say, "Well, maybe there's other things happening. How do I make sure we've got them all?" So asking open-ended questions, questions that are not answered with a yes or a no, but asking what and how, I believe, are better questions than why. Why can be a little bit, put us a little bit on the defensive, but I'm asking something, what's causing that? What's driving that behavior? What's happening that you can't perform this? Or how is that true? How is that happening? How it can be helpful. Using silence. So when I'm asking a question, waiting for a response. And then practice reflective listening techniques. So reflective listening techniques involve not only the words, and you're not going to parrot the words, but you're going to summarize, reflect back, and then also our emotions. So think about it this way. We're not just mirroring back to what we've heard, but we're summarizing and making sure we're capturing the mood and the emotions of the person. We're asking for verification. Now, am I hearing you correctly, in other words? Well, there we go. So then when we think about the future, get agreement on our follow up and follow through sequence, right? What could happen? Worst case scenario, and what are we going to do about it? We both promised we're going to work on this, we're going to do this. We outlined our promises. What could happen what could get in our way, what could stop us, and what are we going to do about it? So not why, but what. Now, I believe that email is a great documentation tool. It's a terrible communication tool. Email and text, terrible communication tools. They don't, because we're not even on camera with each other or over the phone, we're not hearing the inflection and the tone of someone. We might put it in there. So we've documenting our agreements via email, documenting our agreements using text, great ideas. But if we've got a problem to solve around an idea, we need to pick up the phone. We need to meet in person. We need to get on video. We need to have a conversation. And the conversations are really hard to have when it's simply text, when it's simply the written word. So I have a 3 email rule. If someone sends me an email and I respond back and then they send again, or vice versa, goes back once, twice, 3 times, or once, twice, 3 times, I'm picking up the phone because there's something missing. We've got to have a conversation. Now, there's nothing wrong with saying to someone, hey, would you be willing to put together a summary of what we just agreed to and email it to me? Or you might volunteer. It's up to you. If you're the boss, invite the other person, ask the other person, your subordinate, to do that. If you're on equal playing field, if you're colleagues, you might say, hey, would you do it this time? I'll do it next time, whatever. But getting a summary can be really important. And then what are we going to do to prevent a reoccurrence? I talked a little bit about that. Let's talk about what if I fail? What if you fail? What's that going to look like? And how are we going to make sure we've got this nailed and got it solved? There are times when we might need outside help. So there are professionally trained mediators that can help bring 2 people together to really listen to both sides, hear both sides, and try to get them to come to agreement. You might have an employee assistance program. Those folks in the employee assistance field are also skilled listeners and help people. So that's a resource. Sometimes we just might need additional training or coaching. Maybe it's practice, but practicing with a coach, practicing with someone who has experience can be really helpful. So you might decide that, gosh, even though we were well-intended, this didn't go like I thought, and I need an outside resource. So that might be the case, and I'll let you be the judge of that. So in the remaining time that we have together, what I'd like to invite you to do is 2 things. I'm going to call for questions in just a moment, but before I do that, what's your one takeaway, or put in a different method, what's one thing you'll do differently? So drop in the chat, and I see I've got some chats to respond to. Let me look at that. Okay, so I've got to save these chats because here's what I'm going to do, folks, because I don't want to miss anyone. I'm going to put my email in the chat. And then if you would do me the kind favor of, I don't send that directly to someone, not everyone. That was a mistake. So it's Leslie at coachwithleslie.com. And I'll send you those things. So good. Okay, breathing, not making assumptions. Good, good, good. Not making assumptions. Listen to understand. Breathing techniques. Okay, awesome. Good. Okay. Yes. Okay. So the recording is going to be, yes, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Okay. Somebody already put my email. Thank you, Claire. Appreciate that. Listen to understand. So what questions do you have at this point? And again, you can drop them in the chat, or you can, let's see, what causes, let me see if I can start at the beginning of the questions. Oh, why causes a defensive response? It can. Well, think about this. Think about it. I'm not sure this is a question. I think it's just a takeaway. But often when we're children and we did something wrong, mom or dad would say, why'd you do that? Or teacher would say, why'd you do that? Right? I got to defend myself. So want to start with what? Taking in perspective. Okay, awesome. Good. Is there anything you thought I'd talk about today that I haven't talked about, or any questions that you might have? Be happy to respond to those at this time.
Thank you, Leslie. I have a question while everybody is, oh, Marissa has a question, so let's ask that first.
Okay. How can you get through to someone who agrees to do something and repeatedly does not do it? So, you know, Claire, I'll just use you because your name's right in front of me. So Claire, we've talked about this 4 or 5 times, not sure the exact number. And every time we do, you agree to whatever. Help me understand what's happening, what's preventing you, what's getting in your way. You can, you know, phrase it a couple different, but help me understand what's happening that you're not able to keep your commitment. What's going on? So I'm asking a what question now. The help me understand phrase, you really want to use it with some humility, because I can use help me understand in a very condescending way, and I don't want to come off as condescending, but just asking that.
Okay, that's a good one. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Chandra has a question. How can you be more cautious of your tone you use?
So I think asking for people for feedback, because I know I'm not certain how many of you are familiar with behavioral styles. And this material is a little dated. Tony Alessandra has some, let me type his name in the chat so you have it. And he's a PhD, so he's Dr. Tony Alessandra, A-L-L-E-S. I believe I've got that spelled correctly. Oh, it's coming up as not. Maybe it's not. No. That's my best guess. You can Google him and find it. I think if you just put Tony A-L and it'll come up. Anyway, he talks about behavioral styles. So here's what I want to answer that question. Because some behavioral styles can be perceived by others as standoffish, or you've got the wrong tone, or that kind of thing. So he talks about using the platinum rule. And the platinum rule is treating someone as they want to be treated. Because many times we're taught the golden rule, treat each other as you want to be treated. But in terms of perspective and conversation, it's about the other person. So also asking people for feedback about tone. If I'm practicing a conversation, asking an unbiased third party. So unbiased third party might be someone that works for your employee assistance program if you have one, might be your friend's friend, right? Somebody who doesn't know you very well, who can be give you some different feedback. So that would be just practicing and making a recording of yourself. Sometimes people don't like to listen to their own voice, but making a recording and listening can be beneficial too. To just tone, practicing, right? Your side of the conversation. So good. All right, let's see if I missed any.
No, there are no other questions, but that's a very good tip. Also, if you're in a sales space, it's also a good idea to practice on a partner or a friend, and literally practice saying, well, how are you going to do your opening? I often use that technique just to help me be calm and breathe. Yes. I wanted to ask one quick question, if you don't mind.
Oh,
that's another message. These people are more important than me. Oh, Marissa's making a comment.
Oh,
I hear you. Thank you, Marissa, for your engagement. I hear you. To be honest, I've never really been brave enough to have that hard conversation, and I've made my own stories about why I think the person isn't doing something they agreed to. So I will make an effort to have that conversation sooner rather than later. Well done.
Awesome. It's really, we are telling our stories, ourselves stories all the time that may or may not be true. So thank you for sharing that. So yeah. Claire, question.
So it's really around, and you have sort of answered it, but I'm just interested in your opinion. The the quote that the client is king. And I often find that the client actually may not be right all the time. And it's that very difficult space that you have to play. And it might not be a client, it might be your manager, it might be your teammate in your university thesis group that you're in. And it is tricky to have those conversations, you know, the sort of up managing, down managing conversations where you clearly know that they're not right and you have facts to back that up. I know that's it's a long question you're going to have to answer, but it is quite a tricky one for me personally anyway.
Well, there are times where we have to enforce policies or rules or things that we may or may not agree with, right, in the course of our jobs. And so that, yeah, we might be thinking, oh, well, the customer is right, but I don't know. This is our rule. This is just how we have to do it for whatever reason. And so, thanking them for bringing, you know, I appreciate you sharing that with me. However, at this point in time, this is what we have to enforce, or this is what I'm being asked to do, or this is whatever. Like if it's a refund or a shipping thing, or, you know, some of those kinds of things, the company has rules in place for a lot of business reasons.
Yeah.
And so we have to enforce them. But thanking someone, usually showing appreciation. I'm so appreciative that you're willing to share that, or thank you very much. Even and reflect on it. Yeah, as Ashley just said, reflect on what you hear, even if you don't agree. So yeah. And then the other thing I think sometimes we need to do, because especially if we're in a customer service role and we're representing our company, just put up like an invisible shield. I think it was the series, the Harry Potter series, that she talked about Invisicloak or something, right? He could be invisible. Well, just imagine you've got a shield and this shield deflects, right? It's not at you personally. It's there, and you can take it off at the end of the day and be done with all that stuff. But right now, I've got it up because right now I'm doing my job.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you, Ashley. We had a hand up from, I'm not sure if I've got the pronunciation right. Tari? Yes, did you still want to ask a question? Hi.
I think it's more of a comment. Thank you very much, Leslie and the team, for a beautiful, informative presentation. It's more of a comment. You know, with me, some of the other things that I do with the people that report to me is that there are certain things that they would do, whether I agree with them or not agree with them. I'd ask a question like, how do you manage to get this right? You know, how do you do this? Because when you get to understand their perspective, or what cap were they wearing when that happened, it would be easy for you to know exactly what you are dealing with. That way you can deal with the situation and not the person.
Yeah, are you just making a statement, or are you asking a question?
It's more of a statement. It's basically saying that this is some of the other things that I use when it comes to giving feedback and trying to understand where that person is. Because I mean, with the industry that we are in, or with trying to have young people report to you, they want to know why. They're not robots. You know, they don't just do what you tell them to do. They want their voices to be heard. So they will tell you how they managed to get it right, or what cap were they wearing when they did that. So it's good to hear them out and then put your point across, because if you're going to push your point across, you're going to lose them.
Good point.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. It is 5 o'clock. We do have one more question. So if you want to drop off.
That was about these virtual environments and digital tools. And I know we're out of time. Can I still answer this one?
If everyone's happy, they can pop off if they need to, but I think it's a very good question.
Yeah. So I know it's really challenging when we can't be face-to-face. Camera to camera is probably next best. And then the third would be phone. But I also encourage people to schedule regular times to check in with others, and being making sure you hold those. You guys are welcome. I'm glad. Thank you. I see some thank yous. You're very welcome. But making sure that those don't get dropped, that know that those are important. And then as we can, coming back together in person, making those points, but really as much as possible on camera, on the phone, or face to face. And then, you know, sometimes we have to use Teams messages and text messages and stuff like that, but that's just for exchange of information, not around problem solving. All right, I am a minute past what I said I'd be, so I appreciate your time today. Thanks for sharing it with me. And email me, let me know how I can help you. I'll share those documents with you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you for your very practical solutions. And really, it would be great if you could reference some of those books that Leslie mentioned and connect with her on LinkedIn, etc. And excellent to be able to put these in place in your workplace, in your family life, in your university teams. So excellent. Thanks everybody for your engagement this afternoon. And thank you, Leslie. Be well.
Bye-bye.